When your tech goes down, who do you trust?
There's only one name.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zach Miller with Meltech again, just checking in. What we have over here is we got a computer that fails to boot properly. I'm going to show you what that looks like for me and my circumstance. Like I said before in the previous video, this computer is an older one. It's one I can do without, honestly. It just sits around. It was in a basement before, came back up, and I said, hey, what better else to troubleshoot on and show people how to troubleshoot than a system that used to work that no longer works. So what we have here is when we hit the power button, the computer turns on, turns off, turns on, turns off. What this means is we could have a couple different indicators. I'm going to, like any good tech, power off the system first, and I'm going to do some basic checkups on the inside of this. Now, we could have a couple different little problems. I would say, obviously in an issue like this where we're just power cycling, this technically shouldn't be hurting the computer at all. Especially because we're not doing anything inside of it. I want to reiterate that before you work on a computer, you should definitely make sure that the computer is off. All right, we have the computer off, and we're going to make sure it's unplugged, just because, I want to make sure it's unplugged. Now, sorry, these two like to get rowdy sometimes. Yeah, you do. So, what I like to do is double check things, make sure we got everything plugged in. We're going to check our big 24 port cable here. Make sure SATA cable's plugged in. Make sure your USB cable's plugged in. We're going to reach up around here. There's a processor cable, power cable. You can see it right there. Let me get my flashlight. Right down in there. We want to make sure that's plugged in as well. So I'm going to reach in there and I'm going to push on the cable to make sure it's seated properly. Don't be afraid to. If you have to, you always grab your cable here. There's a pin on the back side of it. And by the back, it points towards the front. You can always just grab this, unseat it, and reseat it. There's not a problem with doing that. But it's a little difficult to do with one hand. There we go. And I like to double check my RAM. So on RAM, on some boards, you're going to have these tabs. These tabs should be engaged on the top and the bottom, and sometimes they can be a little finicky to get your fingers around, especially because of the amount of clearance. It is fine if you're careful to use like a pen or something to push the tab down, or a small flathead or something. Just don't, put excessive force on there. So on this board, the RAM channels are in the middle for this one. Sorry, the first two on this one, to use both channels. Make sure this is off, and I'll just swap them. Shouldn't hurt anything, just moving them around. Now we want to make sure we press down until the tab comes up on its own. It's up. We're in the up position. It's a black tab down there. I'm going to put my hand down here. I want to make sure that's seated all the way. It is. Now that RAM is in there good. It's seated all the way. It's uniform across the bottom. It's not sitting in there jagged. We're looking good. Now we got our other bit of Corsair RAM here. We're going to pop this in here as well. You see there's a little cutout on each side, just so you know. And this is DDR4 RAM. You want to make sure you can see there's a keyway on your RAM. Now there's a keyway down in there too. So if you misalign these, do not force them down in. If you're not sure, just take it back out make sure that keyway is aligned, and try again. Now, we're just going to press. I heard a little pop there, which was fine. That's just a little tab engaging. Now, what we could also do is, because this thing was fluctuating in power, I really do need to test the power supply. I just want to double check, make sure everything is fastened, secured, pressed down. You know what? I think we'll even uninstall the graphics card. Just give me 1 minute. I got my handy dandy screwdriver over here. And as I said, it does need cleaned. Has been sitting around for a while. So we're going to take our screws off of here. And yes, what you heard was a screw falling in. When you get, like I said, working with one hand's a little funny. It's not a big deal though, I'll find it. So now on graphics cards, there's a couple different models here. This one has a little red tab down in here. Others will have a push button towards the front, or they'll have a tab here or on the other side, or a push button. I'll kick this up. This one has this little red tab. I'm going to press it down, and I'm going to pull the card straight up. So, and there's our screw. So now that we took that out, I do have memory in here. See, I thought I took all the memory out of this. So there might be an operating system on this already. So it was just sitting and ready to be used. So here's our graphics card. I believe it's just a 1660, nothing, you know, amazing. And like I said, I should dust this. And I think I'll make that another video on how to dust your computer properly so that you don't cause any backfeed. And by backfeed, I mean, so if you go to dust your computer, you need to put something in your fans. I just use my finger and I blow out the computer carefully. Just stick your finger in the fan, blow that fan, stick your finger in another fan, blow that fan. And you want to make sure your computer's off the whole time you're doing that. Make sure it's unplugged, you know. As I said before, this is our graphics card. You know it's a graphics card because you have your video inputs here on the end. So give me a minute here. I'm going to try to line this back up and install it. Now, just like your RAM, this does have a keyway. If you're forcing this, there's a problem. Now, the places that you run into a problem with the graphics card is towards the back of the card here. The clearance for you to get this little metal bracket in there can be kind of tight sometimes. So you got to get that little bracket behind your motherboard. So it sits something like this. And I got to move my cord. So now I can see, I can look right down in there. It's kind of hard to show on the camera, but I can see I'm aligned. So all I got to do is push down, and it's going to pop in. I'm going to put this phone down for just a second so I can get the seated in here the right way and not have to worry about it and have to troubleshoot another part. Like I said, if you have to force it, you're doing it wrong. There it is. Got that snap. And that's a good snap. It means it was seated in there properly. And the tab is in the up position, so it's locked. It's not going anywhere. Give it a firm grip. It's not going anywhere. And what we have here is a 6-pin connector. Most power supplies have them. Looks just like this. And you're just going to plug that into the back of the card here. Now, these connectors can be in a couple of different places. This is an older card. It's kind of a bare model card, but it was a really good card for its time. Don't get me wrong. Now you might have a 6-pin connector and a 6-pin connector. You might have the connectors on the back. It's all the same thing. You just put it in. If you got to force it, you're doing it wrong. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try to power this on again. And if you notice, I try to keep one hand grounded. Yes, you should use a grounding strap. I'm not saying not to. I hardly ever use them because I'm usually grounding myself out on the side of something anyways. Which is another way of doing it. I know some people will argue otherwise. They don't like that method. But in all the years that I've done it, I've never had an issue with it. So we're going to grab our power cord that we have over here. Once again, we're going to plug that into the power supply. We'll go ahead and plug in our HDMI cable to our GPU because we have a GPU. And we left our USBs plugged in from before. No big deal there. So now we're going to come back around and we're going to try to turn it on. We got no power because I flipped the switch earlier for safety. Here we go. We got a light on the board. Got a light on the GPU, so we know those things are getting power. Let's hit the power button. And let's give it a minute. Sometimes boards will do something like this when they're memory training. But this looks like we're still having the same issue. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to power it off again. Now I know all my connectors up in the front are solid. Everything's plugged in, you know, around the top. I flipped the switch on the power. Like I said, you don't want power active on your computer when you're working on it. Give me a minute. I'm going to stand this up and show you the power supply that's in here. Alright, on some of these, in order to get access to your power supply, you need to stand the desktop up. Now remember, the tower, that people like to call it, that's the tower of power. It's where everything resides, okay? So this is your computer. This right here, it's just a monitor. This is not a computer. This is a computer. So let's get in here. These are just thumb screws, but knowing me, I just went a little too hard on them and probably tightened up a little too much when I built this. So I gotta use some help. That and it's kind of chilly in here, so probably did not help me at all. So what we have back here is, don't pay attention to this. This is just the fan controller. We don't need to worry about that fan controller. So down in here is our power supply. Now, I couldn't remember what power supply I had put in here. Now I know it's not a modular power supply, which means that if there is an issue, I'm going to have to replace the whole power supply and all the cables, which you should do anyways. Don't get me wrong. You should do that anyways. But let's verify that we're having power issues. And what we're going to do to do that, how we're going to do that, I can say, is I have a little tool with me today. It's a power supply checker. So what's going to do is tell me the readouts. Now, you don't have to buy this one exactly. You really don't have to buy this one exactly. I bought a little bit nicer one. I'm kind of a Thermaltake fan, so I wanted to buy the Thermaltake, power supply checker. There's all sorts of them out there. You can buy a $10 one, $12 one. They all do the same thing. They all check to see if your power supply is good or not. So, just like on anything else, you need to verify the keyway. Okay, our keyway on here is at the top. So when we plug our 24 pin connector in, just make sure the other keyway is up here. Just going to line it up, and I'm going to do that real quick. Now, I believe that if we were having an electric issue on here, which we could very much be having, like I said, this was in a basement for a while, that our problem would be, I would say it's probably going to be our 12-volt rail. Now there's two main rails on here. There's going to be a 12-volt and your 5-volt. And if they don't read exactly that, then you know you have a bad power supply. Now, if you remember earlier, I said you don't want to work on these with the powers on them, which in most cases is true. But in order to test your power supply, in order to test our power supply, what we need to do is we're going to have to power it on while I have it connected to our tester. Just give me 1 minute here. I gotta put to our connector down there. Now this connector is always the most fun connector to get to. I usually like to connect this connector before I put the motherboard in, because it does stay in there, and it stays in there pretty dang well. Alright, well, we're going to test it as is for now. I don't need that connector anymore. But this power supply is probably going to yell at me. So, on our device here, our tester here, it's detecting that we got our 24 port and our CPU connected. It's going to yell at us. We're going to hold this button down right here. Now you can't see that, but it's failing. So if it's failing because of the CPU, we know why. I didn't plug in the CPU on here. Gives us a good example of what a problem could be. But we should be getting our 12 volts regardless off our 24 pin down here, and we're not. So it looks like this is just a bad power supply. Now if you give me a minute, what I'll do next is I'll grab another power supply and we'll test that theory. Alright, getting back to our PC here, that was not powering on properly. As we know, it didn't check out with our tester. It wasn't going to check out right with the tester. I just had a feeling it wasn't going to work that way. Anyhow, the tester is great. Close, it was bad power supply. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open this power supply here. Now this is a fully modular. It's a little bit newer, a little better than our old power supply. In this bag, we're going to have all our cables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get our packaging out of the way here. As I do that, I will show you what cables we're going to need just to get this thing going. Now, on a fully modular power supply unit, you don't have cables hanging everywhere out of the back, out of the container. What we got here is a power supply that looks like this for a fully modular power supply. And let's see here. It tells you exactly where everything goes. So, if you give me a minute, I'll just set you down right here, a little bit here, and we're going to pull out the cables that we need just in order to get this thing to start. Like I said, I already know what cables we're going to need. I'm just going to pull them out, slap them down back into the container here. into the bag. Now here's our 24 pin cable. We're going to need this guy. Like I said, we're just doing testing with this. We want to verify that we have a bad power supply. Oh, that's a little different. Usually they put those right next to each other, but I'm not going to trip us up for long. There we go. So we got our 24 port connector connected. We're going to press it into our motherboard down here. Once again, just watch where the keyway is. We know we need to hit this in just like so. Like I said, if it doesn't go in, don't force it in, but on most of these, so long as you get it down to, you can double check your pinout on here too by matching the shapes with what's on the board down here. And sometimes it is a pain to get lined up just right. There we go. Goes in, you heard the click, it's all the way in the bottom. Alright, technically all we need to start this now is our CPU cable and our 24 pin cable, but we want to hook up our GPU as well. This does have onboard. Technically I wouldn't have to do it, but we'll do it anyways. Now when you go to connect your cables, like I said, they're all labeled on here. I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So we got our 24 port pin on here. On this power supply, they separated out. Here, ATX 24P is what it's called here. And the other half, your ATX 24P. Come on, focus. Goes right here. Then we got our GPU cable. I'm just setting this up outside of the computer because I don't think I'm going to end up replacing the power supply in this. This is literally just so I could show you guys how to troubleshoot a no power issue. Okay, I'm going to sit you guys right back down in here. So, what do we need now? We need our processor power. Now, on a couple of these, depending on the year that you have of computer, there are 4 ports, 8 ports, and even some 6 ports out there. And if you are working on a system, say like CyberPower or Dell or any of those other brand systems, sometimes, well, at the time, they have proprietary processor connectors on there for your power on this rail up here. In which case, you're going to have to find a way to adapt that. Or pop in a different motherboard, and you'll never have to worry about adapting proprietary anything again except for what goes to that board. So now we're going to plug this in over here. Once again, this is our processor, that power that we're plugging in. If I were just to plug this in, it would probably do the same thing it was doing before. Or something very similar. So on here, we just want to look at our keyway. We got right, we just got to line it up. Come on, come on. Alright, finally got that cable in there. Just had to take out the cooler, move that out of the way. So, I'm gonna pop that cooler back in. These are simple. You know, I really should re-grease this since I have it open, but I don't actually plan on using this computer again. So, I think what's on there is going to be sufficient for what we really just want to get the power on. And if you're asking me, well, Zach, I would really like to know how often I should replace my thermal grease. Well, I would probably say about 2 years. 2 years is probably a good time to check it. I wouldn't just open it up, take the cooler off, and then slap it all back together like I'm doing here if I were going to be running this computer. We're just going to make a mess, and if you ever got your cooler off, you should probably go ahead and re-grease it anyways. This is just a case of, like I said, I'm not putting this back into production, so do not monkey see, monkey do on this one. Now I'm going to be right back as soon as I get these other 2 screws in. This cooler can be a little fussy sometimes when it comes to getting it in the proper way with the right tension. And you want to make sure that you don't put your coolers on too tight. Putting them on too tight is a big problem for some people. You put it on too tight, it smashes everything together, and we don't want to do that. It just will cause some CPU issues. Things may not read right. It'll cause some flux in the board. And by board flux, I'm talking about if your board was straight, either does this or it's going to do this. And you don't want that. So what happens is if you were to do that, when the board heats up, you're going to have problems. Or when it cools down, it may not work again. So I just want to go where this is nice and tight. I'm not going to fight with the screws too much. I know it feels like it's on there. This cooler specifically will actually turn a little bit on you when it's on there. It's the Cooler Master version of like a Hyper 212. Now, this is going to look like a mess because I didn't actually install this to have it in a running environment. Like I said, this is just for testing. Now, all we got to do is, everything's out of the case. We're just going to have the power supply off to the side, just like this. Just get it off to the side. Let's get rid of this cable bag. We don't need that right now. So this is what we have. Now what we're going to do is find what I did with that power cable, which is right here. I'll plug this in. And we are going to see if this is going to come alive for us. So to me, it looks like probably had a bad power supply before, because now our RAM's lighting up. We didn't have lighting up RAM before. That could be normal. That could be at training. Like I said, it hasn't had a successful power on for quite some time. So don't just rush to like, oh no, it shut down, I'm going to have problems. That may not be a problem at all. Could just be the RAM training up. And it could do that a couple times. And we can tell it's firing off. We got a little LED down there. That's usually what it will start cycling to if it's training or if the computer's trying to figure out what's going on. We'd also use it as an error code. So we had C1 on there. That stayed on there for a little bit. So let's not rush things quite yet. All right, as I was stating before, we were having booting problems. So we kept getting C1. I'm going to shut the power off on this. I'm going to unplug it. We kept getting C1. We're going to wait for that battery, the draw on the board to die out. We kept getting C1. So C1 usually indicates that we're having a problem with RAM for this particular board. Whether it was slotted in the wrong position or not, or we got bad RAM. I'm going to say that we might not have had it pushed in all the way, which does happen. Or that it just didn't like the setup. I think our install was fine. So we're going to do this again. I think on this board it's the 2 in the center that we're using. If this doesn't work, then we'll do some reading and read up what exactly are the 2 slots we should be using on here. Each board is different. It seems to go in like low time arrows of which should be using depending on what the manufacturer did those years. All right, so there we go. So the culprit on this system was just a bad power supply. Like I said, I probably won't fix this until I pick up a used power supply somewhere, something cheap to throw in here. This is just a fun system to get going. As you see, my wife was the last one to use this system. I think that's where we're going to end this for now. I might show you guys how to install Windows. It's pretty easy. But that'll be on a different video. Alright guys, thanks for checking in and getting some tips on how to work on a system that's failing on powering up. As you can see, we're up and live.